Production funding for Behind the Headlines is made possible in part by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
The ongoing debate over tax incentives and economic development tonight on Behind the Headlines. I'm Eric Barnes with the Daily Memphian, and thanks for joining us. I am joined tonight by Worth Morgan, member of the Memphis City Council. Worth Morgan, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Along with Reed Dolberger, president and CEO of EDGE, the local agency that grants most of the tax incentives in Memphis and Shelby County. Reed, thank you for being here.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Along with Bill Dries, reporter with the Daily Memphian. I will go to you first, Councilman Morgan. And is it time to, some people, as long as we've been doing Behind the Headlines and longer, but certainly as long as we've been doing Behind the Headlines, people have called for changes to tax incentives, abolishing them, ending them. I don't think you're in the abolishment camp when it comes to tax incentives and such. But is it time for changes? Is it time for, if only an evolution to how we do tax incentives? Is that something you would support on the Memphis City Council?
Yeah, I think there's certainly the majority of people that would like to see some change or adjustment to the way we do incentives here in Memphis, Shelby County, but there's not a majority opinion about what that change should be. And it's fair to have a conversation every once in a while to kind of sit down and determine and take a look at where we are versus other communities, other cities that we're competing against regionally, what we can do better. What are some things that maybe our priorities have changed that are more important to us, and how we can be more competitive. So it's not unfair to have conversations every once in a while, but we need to be careful that in those conversations that we don't enter or create kind of an uncertainty in the market for businesses in our pipeline that are looking at Memphis. We don't want to scare them away by some of kind of the more outlandish ideas that might be pitched, but to sit down and have a reasonable discussion about what could be changed, sure. Do I think we're going to come to a majority opinion about what those changes are? Maybe, maybe not.
One example of a change, if you could wave a magic wand and make happen, what is a change you would make?
So I would like to see how we can make our pilot process, and we talk about pilots, we also have grants and loans and TIFs, TDZs, all different types of economic incentives. And even once you get into pilots, I think, Reed's the expert, but I think we have 6 different versions that we offer. So there are things that other cities do to make a quicker, simpler, easier, more straightforward process. And I talked about uncertainty, and that's going to be a big key to these businesses. So when they look at Memphis and they're deciding whether or not to invest in Memphis, they can know with certainty when it comes to their time to make a decision what they're going to get back from us, rather than having all these requirements that are tacked on that they really won't know until they get into the community, into the bidding process and getting contracts back. That makes it too difficult for them to know for certain what their numbers are. And so they're not even able to really count it towards us in our favor. They have to say, all right, we can't count on that incentive. Let's just figure out what we can actually guarantee that we'll get. And so sometimes we're not getting the full credit of what we're offering.
I should note too, before we go to Reed Dolberger, that next week we will have Commissioner Tammy Sawyer, County Commissioner, as well as City Councilman Martavius Jones, both more on the camp of wanting much more radical reform, or radical is a pejorative, but more deep.
Oh, radical's okay.
Well, I understand that you agree with that, and that, but I would not a fair characterization of how they would put their proposals. But Reed Dolberger, you've been in this role for some years now. EDGE was formed to try to streamline. Councilman Morgan talked about streamlining. Certainly from the business side, I think I always hear that people want it to be quicker, they want it to be simpler. From the accountability side, short of radical or abolishment or any of that kind of thing, are there things that you could do, that EDGE could do, to be more transparent and more, maybe give more comfort to those who feel like they don't have control over or understanding of, first, what incentives are being doled out, and that they are accomplishing what they were meant to achieve?
Well, Eric, I think we can, just as a blanket, say we can almost always do a better job. And to the councilman's point, we're certainly open to that discussion. EDGE has actually won national awards for its transparency. We think we're pretty good at it. So every pilot is approved in a public meeting. The meeting's public noticed. All the documents that the EDGE board receives to evaluate a project are available to the public in advance. They're proactively sent not only to the media, to all elected officials, but also to everyone who signs up on our list. So we go to extreme lengths to make sure that all of that information is available up front. And then, of course, if anybody has an issue or a concern or a question about any of those projects, they can come to our meeting, and during public comment, they can pose that to the board. They can say, and so I do think that the public and elected officials have a lot of opportunity to both understand these projects up front, comment on them. You talked about compliance. We do annual compliance reports with all of our active pilots. Those documents are in the public domain. For those projects that don't meet any of their key metrics, we go through a rescoring process and make sure that the incentive that is in place is the appropriate one. So again, is it possible to do a better job? Yes. But to the sometimes blanket criticism that this is not a transparent process, I take issue. It is absolutely a transparent process.
Let's go to Bill Dries.
Councilman, what do you think about the idea put forward by your colleague Martavius Jones that in cases where the business that we're talking about wants to come here and not pay a certain wage, that perhaps the city council and the county commission should be back in the game, so to speak, again, and actually have a vote on those kind of economic incentives?
Yeah, so I mean, EDGE was created in order to try to take the politics out of it and take the city council and county commission out of it to some extent. We still have approval authority on things like TIFs. And I get what Councilman Jones is saying. There are other jurisdictions that do require a certain amount be paid. I think I was looking at the city of Austin earlier today. I think requires $15 per job in order to be eligible for their incentives. And we could look at something like that. I would be afraid. I have constituents that they make $8, $9 an hour, and they would love to have a job that pays 12 or 13. And I don't think Memphis is quite in a position yet in terms of our economy to turn up our nose at higher paying jobs that are going to improve the quality of life and the take home pay of a number of the citizens that we have here. So I don't want to say we're kind of, for the sake of political ideology, talking points, to do something that's going to negatively impact people that are living in our neighborhoods. I mean, really kind of take it out of the political speak up in the air and put it into, one of my communities that I represent, like Binghamton, and they would love some $12 to $13 an hour jobs. And I don't want to turn to them and say, no, we didn't think that was good enough, so we weren't willing to bring that to you. Mm-hmm. All the while, I think they would be very interested in begging for it. And I think the market here in Memphis would be able to find a large supply of labor for a number of jobs that Councilman Jones would not be interested in incentivizing. So other communities may be further along with us in terms of their economy. Memphis and where we are, we still need those jobs, and we should be pressing for everyone that we can get.
That there has been much discussion about a joint city council county commission meeting on this topic, and I think the original thought was that it would happen in February. That didn't happen. As far as you know, are there still plans for that type of joint meeting on this?
It's scheduled. I just got the calendar invite, so I believe it's going to be late March and the second meeting in mid-April to follow up. Okay.
Reed, do you work with the industries that are interested in coming here? Some do and some don't. What I've heard from people I've talked to who are involved in the process is that some of them, at least some of them, say, well, look, the other businesses are asking for these incentives, so we feel like we should too as well, since it's out there. How many applicants do you see who take that approach versus we absolutely have to have these incentives in order to be able to do this?
Well, Bill, let me divide the projects into sort of two different types. And understand there are 9 pilot granting entities in Shelby County. Probably the entity that does the most projects is the Downtown Memphis Commission. I think EDGE probably does the second most, and the Health, Education, and Housing Facilities Board of Memphis the third most. We do a combination. Most of our projects are what we call employment or job-based projects, but we do a few real estate projects. Both Downtown Memphis Commission and the Health and Ed Board primarily do real estate projects. And I think you need to look at them slightly differently. The real estate projects are tied to a specific site. The project either happens or it doesn't happen. The rate of return for the investors is either high enough that they do the project or it isn't. And we might consider an incentive to get them there. The employment projects are competitive from a very different perspective. If you are a manufacturer or a distribution company or a back office, and you're going to be leasing space in the Mid-South market, you can be pretty much anywhere. It is one market. It's the same labor force, it's the same transportation assets. It's all the things that we brag about for Memphis are really regional assets. And what we have seen over the years is, particularly on the industrial side, the distribution side and the manufacturing side, more of those new projects, more of that new construction is not happening in our community, but it's happening in adjacent communities. It's happening for a variety of reasons. It's not necessarily just an incentive issue, but it is nonetheless happening in adjacent communities. Those projects don't necessarily need the incentive because they can't make the numbers work. They need the incentive because they're getting an incentive offer from pretty much every community they're looking in, to your point. And if we don't offer one, we're not cost competitive any longer. It is a highly competitive world. There are thousands of organizations countrywide like EDGE offering tax abatements being the most common kind of incentive, but cash grants being very common as well. So we offer these incentives in many cases, not because the company can't do the project without it, it's because the company won't do the project here without the incentive. And so we understand the role that we play. There are many things these companies are looking at in terms of communities, but when they get down to the short list, every community on that list, every site on that list can work for the company. And they're basically looking for where is the best deal. And that's really the role that the pilot incentives fill in those employment-based projects. Mm-hmm.
I believe it was the commission that you told us pretty early on in this most recent round of discussions. And I think what you said was to the effect of, if you want higher paying jobs, if you want jobs in a sector that is currently not dominant in our local economy, you're going to have to do even more in terms of incentives. Am I accurate in what you said?
Yes. But let me broaden it just a tad.
Okay.
We'll have to do more, period. Incentives, again, are only a piece of the equation. Incentives become very important at the end of a decision-making process because everything else has been factored in. You're either the strongest candidate or not, and a decision is going to be made very quickly. So there isn't time to necessarily change your workforce, your infrastructure, any of the other things that will drive a decision. It's what can you do in the next couple of weeks to get a best and final offer into this company, and typically that's the incentive. But I don't know, when we have more time, when we take the longer term perspective, if we want different results than we're getting today, the community needs to do more. Maybe that more is we need to do more in terms of telling our own story, marketing the community to try to attract other entities in here. We need to do more in terms of growing small startup companies into mid-sized startup companies. We need to do more to improve our quality of life, our tax and regulatory abilities, to provide buildings and sites suitable to the types of industries we're interested in attracting. So basically, yes, if we want better results than we're getting today, we need to do more because we are assisting projects across the spectrum today. And I'd like to go back, if I can, just for a moment to the question that you asked the councilman related to wage rates. And clearly we have some council people and commissioners who believe that we should focus more on high wage jobs. I believe that we have others who are more interested in focusing on those Memphians in the greatest need. It isn't either or. We don't have to have one or the other. The EDGE approach is we need jobs along the spectrum. Certainly we appreciate the value that high wage jobs bring to our community, and we do those projects. And we have a separate added incentive for projects that pay higher wage pay higher wages. But at the same time, 45% of Memphians have a high school education or less. And according to the census, they're averaging about $25,000 a year. If we're only creating higher wage jobs, we are not creating jobs for those individuals. And if they don't have cars, they can't get to those jobs if they're located in surrounding communities. Our philosophy is we need jobs along the spectrum, jobs that the people that the councilman referenced can access. Our standard right now is at a minimum pay of $13 an hour plus employer subsidized healthcare. That's the bottom end. At the upper end, we have done projects with jobs at 100, 150, 175,000 a year. Again, we try to create jobs across the spectrum so that people in all walks of life, Memphian walks of life, have an opportunity.
And again, I should note that we will have Commissioner Tammy Sawyer and Councilman Martavis Jones on the show next week to talk with a different perspective and wanting more change. But Worth Morgan from Memphis City Council, talking about that spectrum of jobs, three the sort of big name things that have not worked out as maybe everyone would have hoped were Bluff City Law, which was filmed here for a season or part of a year. The Mitsubishi plant, which is a manufacturing plant, and ServiceMaster, at least a part of ServiceMaster is moving to Atlanta. It's actually not the bulk of the employees here, to be clear, because they separated the company into Terminix. Terminix is staying as far as we know. But all three of those didn't necessarily go as great as we would have liked, right? Were those failures?
And I would add Electrolux in there as well.
Sure, yeah.
Which received a different type of incentive and it was a little bit before EDGE's time.
That's why I left that one out. It is definitely the poster child for a lot of incentive. And I think, I don't want to Reed can address it, but I think Reed has said before that was before and we don't do them that way anymore. But on these three more recent ones, what went wrong and does that make them failures?
Everything's a case-by-case analysis. And so for something like Bluff City Law, you give a shot to them because if it works out, it can be one of the greatest marketing tools for the city of Memphis in terms of our tourism and attracting people to come and visit and maybe potentially live here. So there can be huge rewards for things like that. The way that we try to structure the incentives and the way that I prefer to is more of you, for lack of a better phrase, eat what you kill. If you're not producing, then you're not going to have that abatement. So it's always above and beyond what was currently being produced. And then we're able to rebate or to abate the taxes that they would be paying. We give them credit for the investment that they're making in Memphis and for the jobs that they're producing. So even if a company fails under that model, Memphis doesn't fail because it's nothing is lost. It's more of an opportunity cost in terms of the amount of time we put on it. But it doesn't drain a pool, like a restricted pool of funds that could have gone to someone else. It doesn't prohibit anybody else from getting the next incentive. It's we gave that business an opportunity to succeed here in Memphis, and maybe they do, maybe they don't. But we're protected on the downside, and there's a huge upside if it turns into a win. And that's the right way to do it. And there are wrong ways to do it. We can go back into history, into Electrolux and others. But if somebody doesn't generate an increase in property tax revenue, if somebody doesn't generate sales tax revenue that we can then capture in a surcharge and feed back into them to cover the bonds, then they don't get that incentive. So that's what I mean by eat what you kill. They have to be able to produce a lot in order to receive a little.
For you, Reed, those three projects, again, across that spectrum, Mitsubishi, big, heavy manufacturing, Bluff City Law, ServiceMaster. Do you view those as failures? And will Memphis get some money back, or is it what's called clawbacks in the industry, or is it just more the kind of scenario that Worth Morgan described?
Okay, so one of the good things about pilot tax incentives versus cash grants is the company gets an annual benefit with an annual abatement. So what we give the company moves in lockstep with what the company gives us. So we structure these agreements so the companies on the employment project. So the company is committed to jobs, to wages, to capital investment, and to contracts with local women and minority-owned firms. So as they fulfill their agreement, they get a tax abatement. If the project doesn't succeed, if it closes, if it fails, then the tax abatement ends. And so Bluff City Law, we got 10 episodes plus the pilot. Certainly we would have loved for that to be renewed. They got a 1-year tax abatement, and then the tax abatement ended because that was our deal. They got 1 year for every 10 programs, every 10 hours that was on the air. Mitsubishi Electric, that's a situation where the market, they invested a lot of money in our community, a lot more money than they committed to. They were all in for Memphis. The market for their product didn't materialize. They sold the plant to Hyosung, which is a Korean firm, which is also producing electric transformers like Mitsubishi Electric did, will ultimately have more employees and more investment. So with a little luck, if Hyosung is successful, that becomes a win for us. Because at the end of the day, what we have in terms of jobs, wages, investment, and contracts with MWBEs will be even more than we had initially anticipated. I'm sorry.
ServiceMaster, and then we'll go to Bill for the closeout.
So certainly, when ServiceMaster did their project in 2016, they committed to 965 jobs downtown. They have since split that company essentially into multiple parts. But at the end of the day, that commitment remains in place. Last year, as we were looking at the data, they had over 1,000 jobs. We're still vetting the numbers, but clearly over 1,000 jobs. That commitment for 965 jobs remains. So we are protected in that case, as we are actually in all the pilot cases. So would we have loved to have kept the ServiceMaster brand jobs? Absolutely. But we as a community are protected based on the commitment we made to them and the commitment they made to us.
Bill.
With about 3 minutes remaining, my question to each of you, starting with Councilman Morgan, is do you think that what's happening here is we have companies who are staying for as long as they have the abatement and then all along had plans to leave once that was done?
I think it'd be very difficult for a business to plan 10 and 15 years out to a certainty, because the market's going to change, the industry in Memphis. So you're getting into a bit of a question about retention pilots, and that's almost an entirely different issue with the same goal and outcome in terms of jobs in Memphis. But there is a certain aspect where these businesses that come to Memphis are going to keep their cards close to their chest. We ask to look at their numbers, open up their books. We try to understand their business model here as best as possible and make a fair decision. And there are plenty of them that we turn down and don't come to the Edge board for a vote, or the council, or any of the other boards.
Reed, your view on that. Are there people who are getting these incentives who are kind of watching the clock on this, so to speak?
No, not really. If you have an example of what we could discuss a specific case, but no. There's a cost to moving a business and a business operation. And to the councilman's absolutely right. People's crystal ball over 5, 7, 9, 11, 15 years is pretty hazy. But I don't recall any pilots that we've dealt with where a pilot ended and the company moved.
Can I
Yep.
go? I'm going to, just with a minute left, it's a similar family of things, but I'll go to you, Councilman Morgan. The city is has bought a building. Is bought 100 North Main downtown. It's partly downtown Memphis Commission is partly involved. It's more moving pieces. Bill has written about it. Tom Bailey's written about it for us. Others have. Is this the beginning of the city buying blighted buildings? I mean, or is this literally the only time it will ever happen? I mean, what's the big picture on this?
It's not the first time we've done it. And I don't love the model. Again, I think in the debate, the metaphor I used was we were dealt a bad hand and tried to make the best of it. But we've done this also with a property in Binghamton with some apartments that we were able to purchase as a city. We can offer incentives. We put out an RFP to developers. We know what's going to be great for that community there, and we hope someone can build to that. And so I think it's a way, I don't want the city of Memphis being a real estate business, but sometimes in very unique circumstances, it is in the best interest of the city of Memphis and the surrounding area. And I think 100 North Main met that criteria.
Do you think, I mean, as much development has happened downtown and improvements that have happened and are continuing, there's some other big, I mean, part of the argument for doing this was that building is so big, such an eyesore, its location. Well, right down the street is the Steric, and there's probably a couple others. Does this now create another bidder for anyone who wants to sell one of these empty buildings?
Potentially. Sure. I mean, I think it makes this an available site where maybe they could have had more difficulty, but in the game of economic incentives, we got to, pick and choose our battles. And I think 100 North Main, again, is a absolute bullseye of an opportunity for economic development, just radiating out from an incredible project that could go there. We wish it could have been done privately, but with a little government help, I think we can get a great project moving forward finally.
Okay, and Reed gets to dodge that question because we are out of time. Thank you both for being here. Again, we'll have two folks on it, really with a different perspective on this. Tammy Sawyer from the County Commission, Martavius Jones from the City Council on next week. If you missed any of this episode, you can see it at WKNO.org or search YouTube Behind the Headlines. You can also download the full podcast of the show from the Daily Memphian site, wherever you get your podcasts. Again, we'll see you next week.